Hey, sports fans, what's happening? You're back with Browns Only. Today, we're going to start off a little bit different because it's not only Browns. In fact, the headlines are just going to be Cavs related. We got a couple things to get to right now. I believe it's July 8th. Hard to keep track. The holiday just passed. It always disorients me a little bit. You see my live from downtown Cleveland. A lot of hype and speculation around what the Cavaliers will do in this year's NBA free agency. Haven't done much anything yet, but they did re-sign Donovan Mitchell to a 4-year, $273 million contract. You could say he took a little less. That's a pretty penny, though. But what is still to be determined, likely will be determined this week, as it is Wednesday, again, midweek, is whether LeBron will return, whether he will make the starting lineup for the Cavs. James Harden at point, Donovan Mitchell at shooting guard, LeBron James at St. Vincent St. Mary at the small forward, Jared Allen probably at power forward, and then of course you got Evan Mobley. Now there are a couple other players still available in NBA free agency, like DeMar DeRozan that just got cut by the Kings, and there's speculation as to a few other players like Jonathan Kuminga possibly coming to the Cavs. We're going to transition right into on this show. Again, huge Cavs fan. I didn't burn my LeBron jersey, so I had to bust that out for this show a little love for the town. But right now, we'll go through the offseason acquisitions of the Cleveland Browns because that's what we do on this show. We give you knowledge, information about the Browns, what's going on. So again, not a lot going on in terms of the news in between, kind of like the OTAs and the end of the voluntary stuff to moving on to training camp, which will start at the end of July. So why don't we jump right into who the Browns got? But first, let's talk about who they lost. Now, the big loss, obviously, was Myles Garrett in that trade. We'll talk about that, reference that a few times, where obviously he was traded to the Rams for a first, a second, and a third. And, of course, Jared Verse, who is a key acquisition for the Browns defense, which will come on touch on in a few minutes again. But to, really detail who the Browns lost, right, in free agency or since the end of the season, David Njoku is no longer a Brown, right? Longtime Brown, played for about 10 years for us. Same draft as Myles Garrett. Both of those players no longer Browns. Again, longtime, lifetime Browns. But Njoku will be catching passes from Herbert out there in LA. Wyatt Teller, who was a starting guard for the Browns, he signs with Houston. Joe Bitonio, by now, talked about in the last couple shows, he retired. Jack Conklin, he might as well retire, man. He's been so injured. He's still unsigned, but Martin Emerson did sign the cornerback for the Browns, former cornerback. He was injured last year, hurt his Achilles, missed the whole season, but he signed seems like a prove-it deal with the Saints, right? And then Shelby Harris is another guy that jettisoned, left the Browns via free agency and went to the New York Giants. Now, when we talk about the draft picks, we've talked about already on the show, who the Browns drafted. It started at pick number 9 overall with Spencer Fano out of Utah, right? The offensive tackle. That's likely where he'll be starting at for the Browns. And their second first-round draft pick was KC Concepcion, who we talked about recently, just signed his deal with the team as being the last Browns draft pick that signed their deal with the team. And if we move on to the second round, even better work there, right? So when you look at the fact that they signed E-Man, which is Emmanuel McNeil Warren, and also they drafted Denzel Boston, which it almost didn't seem like, that was legit, because who would have thought that he'd be still available, for us at that point? So, that was an excellent value for the Browns, especially, really all 4 of those first draft picks. Those guys really could, I would say pan out for us and be, continue to be staples for the team. Then moving on to the third round, got another offensive lineman, Austin Barber out of Florida, who was drafted. I don't know if I mentioned Emmanuel McNeil Warren is out of Toledo. Denzel Boston is out of Washington. So after Austin Barber. I believe we bounced to the 5th round. Hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Had a couple 5th round draft picks in Justin Jefferson. And then also Royer was picked in the 5th round. So Justin Jefferson, a linebacker out of Alabama, Joe Royer, a tight end out of Cincinnati. He did set the single season record for receptions in his junior season at Cincinnati for the Bearcats. So that's Joe Royer. And then we got Parker Brailsford, who is a guy who is looking to compete for the Browns starting center position as an acquisition for the Browns, obviously through the draft. One of the more interesting picks in the draft for me is Taylor Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas that the Browns drafted in the 6th round. So with Taylor Green, it'll be very interesting to see, how he fares in terms of being on the active roster this year. Because don't forget, one thing about the acquisitions, it's all about really who makes that 53-man active roster. Otherwise, guys could go and be committed to the practice squad, which usually carries, I think, around 15. Don't quote me on that. But if not, they would likely be cut and they basically be dropped off or sent to the streets. You send them to the streets to just be signed by anybody to be a free agent, right? But last draft pick is Carson Ryan, tight end out of BYU. And so that is basically the summation of the Browns draft picks. Now with the offseason acquisitions or free agents, I'm gonna do it slightly different. I'll go ahead and just start off with offense. They didn't do anything at the quarterback or the running back position in terms of getting free agents, right? But when we look at tight end, Jack Stoll is a tight end that the Browns signed. That was a former New Orleans Saint. He played for the Saints last year. I think he has like 18 career receptions. So don't look for him to be a factor in the passing game big time. But I did mention, for example, that we drafted Joe Royer and Carson Ryan both to compete at the tight end position, along with guys like that were already there, like Brendan Bates, and of course Fannin, who will be returning. I did want to mention that the Browns signed a fullback, again, not guaranteed to make the active roster, but a veteran, formerly played with the Broncos, Michael Burton. So it'll be interesting to see him in there competing. Browns made another big trade beside Myles Garrett. It was acquiring right tackle Titus Howard from the Houston Texans. Now, Titus Howard did play his college ball, I believe, at Alabama and A&M, so he also went to a HBCU, just like Shedeur Sanders. 2 other linemen that were acquired in free agency, Elton Jenkins, who will either start as center or guard for the Browns. And then also Elton Jenkins was from the Packers, but then also Zion Johnson, who was from the Chargers. Now, Elton Jenkins coming back from a broken leg. Looks like he's on pace to, be healthy by week 1, right? He's been participating in some of the offseason activities. He's definitely been there. So that's awesome. So you got the 3 offensive line acquisitions, again, in addition to, for example, Spencer Fano, and then Fano, and then also like Austin Barber and Brailsford. So you see how the line was shaping out. Again, we're bringing back guys like Dewan. I know we're talking about acquisitions, but Zinter's still here. Wimpler's still here. So those guys will compete. Tevin Jenkins was re-signed. So re-signing, not necessarily acquisition, but you can kind of see how that offensive line starting to shape out. Didn't really sign any veteran wide receivers. Don't forget, again, we did draft those 2 young studs, Concepcion, who is also a punt returner. Boston actually even had a couple punt return touchdowns at Washington. So that's very interesting to see if he might return a few himself. But that kind of summarizes like the offensive acquisitions for the Browns. Now, when we look at the defensive side of the ball, one guy that I overlooked sometimes as I summarize like who the Browns acquired this offseason was Kalia Davis. Now, Kalia Davis does look like he could potentially be a starter, especially like if Malik Collins isn't healthy, Michael Hall Jr. doesn't step his game up, because if he doesn't step his game up, then he might get dropped off. But Michael Hall's still young, so I mean, he give him time to, he's just been injured, right? But we got Mason Graham there, right? So I'm just breaking it down. These are not necessarily acquisitions. Kalia Davis was the acquisition on the defensive line. And how could we talk defensive line if we're not talking about Jared Verse? Jared Verse, we already talked about him on the show. Jared Verse from the crib. He's from Dayton. So I'm going to give him props right there, right? But he did move to PA when he was young, played his high school ball there, went to Florida State. Now, one thing I liked about Jared Verse is he's going to give you leadership, vocal leadership, maybe that Myles Garrett didn't necessarily always give you, right? I think that Myles Garrett was like a guy who would lead by example with this play, but maybe he was a little, I don't say distant, like you looked at him like, he's big bro, right? I don't know if he's always that approachable. I can't say that for sure, but I know that Jared Verse definitely is coming across like one of the guys already. And one of the stories I like that came about since the Jared Verse Myles Garrett trade basically is that when Verse got the news, he found out that he was being traded. He said, I want to go address my teammates, right? So he's not one of the more veteran guys in the locker room because Verse has only played 2 years in the league. Jared Verse, again, the defensive end out of Florida State, only played 2 years in the league for the Rams. But in those 2 years, he's a 2-time Pro Bowler and Rookie of the Year. So with that being said, moving on to the linebacker position for the Browns. The Browns do have the last 2 defensive Rookie of the Years in Jared Verse and then Carson Schlesinger. Now, we know we lost Devin Bush. Now, I didn't mention it at the top of the show. That was also another key loss, right? So he signed a deal with the Bears that we probably could have matched, but Devin Bush maxed out last year. That was the best season he had in his career. He played outstanding, but Quincy Williams is a guy that we brought in from the Jets who was a all-pro player himself, in a former lifetime, right? Because football is so temporary. NFL, not for long, right? So a few years ago, he was playing at a top-notch level. The Jets will suck the life out of anybody like a succubus, right? And so they beat us last year, right? They returned them punts and everything, returning kicks, returning punts. Special teams got to improve for the Browns, but Quincy Williams, who is the brother of Quinnen Williams, played for the Jets last year, missed some time, but he's looking to rebound some of that all-pro form that he had early in his career as he teams up with Carson Schlesinger, which really, we'll talk about that third linebacker position later. We talked about Justin Jefferson being drafted, but in the base 4-2-5 scheme that they ran under Schwartz, third linebacker, not as much of a deal. But what is a deal is who will play nickel for the Browns, right? So Daniel Thomas, he's a special team guy. He plays some safety. Could he be the third safety for the Browns? They drafted Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Could it be Miles Bryant, who the Browns signed, a cornerback from the Texans, who's got experience in the nickel already? Right. So, for example, the Browns did not re-sign Rayshawn Jenkins. So that's another guy who left via free agency, like Bush. However, it's going to be interesting to see who fills that nickel spot, whether it's a guy like Daniel Thomas, again, the former Bear, the safety, more considered a safety, or Miles Bryant, who was brought in from the Texans. Those are really the majority of the acquisitions through the draft and free agency for the Browns. Also talked about who left for the Browns. There's a couple of undrafted free agents I feel have a pretty good chance to make this Browns roster. So we'll talk about a defensive end in particular, because I think that's a spot, like, for example, that, that guys do have a chance to potentially stick to the roster at. Because we talked about, for example, how, the Browns lost Myles Garrett, for example. They also attempted to sign AJ Espinosa at one point, but that signing fell through because of physical concerns that the Browns had from him recovering from a knee injury. And he eventually signed with the Philadelphia Eagles in this offseason. So with that being said, Spencer Fano's brother, Logan Fano, is a defensive end linebacker, 6'5", 250 out of Utah as well, that comes in as an undrafted guy. What I liked about him, touched on the show previously, had 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks last season for the Utes, right? Now, Kyle Willingham, now Michigan's coach, that both the Fano brothers played under. I think that either he or Tyreek Sapp have a really good chance of, making this roster. There are a couple corners who I feel have a chance to make it. One being Michael Coach Jr. So he's a corner that, potentially could make the roster. And I believe he was from West Virginia. And then you got a couple other cornerbacks that are contributing to some depth to the Browns. So there was a late signing in the summer, Tyron Herron, cornerback that the Browns signed. And then also Nate Evans out of Delaware was another cornerback that the Browns signed. So, for example, like you look at a guy like a Donovan McMillan, who was a safety last year that the Browns signed, an undrafted free agent who stuck around, made the squad. So similar, somebody like Coates or Herron, they could make the 53 as well. So don't be surprised by something like that. Again, we talk about the undrafted free agents. I mean, Aaron Anderson was a guy that stepped up out of LSU. He came in for a tryout and he got signed to a contract for, with the Browns. So I would just say that, some of the undrafted free agents, they could stick around. Any of them could make the roster. But I do think that Fano has a really good chance to make it a defensive end because of the weakness or the deficiencies at that position. And don't be surprised to see at least one of those defensive backs, whether, again, it be a Herron, a Coates, any of those guys that they brought in. Again, don't forget about Daniel Thomas and also Miles Bryant, right? And, of course, Miles Harden returning to compete for the nickel position, but he was a player that was there last year. So no shortage of Mileses, right? But that's about all I got for the show today, guys. Again, we talk about offseason acquisitions. This kind of summarizes the moves that the Browns made in the offseason to fill out their roster. As always, it is go Browns, woo, 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 right? With the show, Browns only. You can always support the show. Dollar Master Yoda 1980 if you just want to drop a little donation with the Cash App. Big Rube Promotions and Entertainment brings you the show. What is that? BRPE, Big Rube Promotions and Entertainment. Probably get some t-shirts made up. Y'all see how I stay fly. But this will probably be the last time you see me in a cutoff. Sorry, ladies. But yeah, Big Rube Promotions and Entertainment. Definitely appreciate your patronage. If you love the show, smash that like button, like and subscribe. As people say, you'll get notifications as to when we go live again with this show. Browns only. Rudy signing off. Always happy to bring you this show, man. I love doing it. So again, it's not just go Browns, but go Cavs. Again, as we continue to pursue LeBron James, and we'll see what's going on there. I'm hearing a lot of scuttlebutt that black SUVs are being sent to try to give their pitch. Man, somebody bust that black SUV's tires because you need to stay at the crib, LeBron. Look, man, we love you here, man. Ain't no place like home, right? Come on back home. We need some of this. We need some of that jumping off. So hopefully we'll see that soon. Hey, I'm signing out. Rudy Rude. You can catch me on the after show. What I am going to do, though, with this offseason acquisition series is we'll go ahead and we'll at least do one show that'll detail the offseason acquisitions for the rest of the AFC North and like maybe, who departed via free agency as well. But expect that show soon. Other than that, again, I'll probably drop a live on the Patreon page. We'll drop the link somewhere, maybe in the chat or anything like that. Please feel free to comment on the show. Tell me how much you loved it. Tell me how much you hate it. But whatever you do, go ahead and press that thumbs up. I'll catch y'all on the next episode. See y'all.